What is going on, y'all? KMBest here. Firehair has been one of the most hyped cards of the entire season, which is crazy because this is a season that included Agamotto in it. Let's take a look at Firehair, the decks that she's played in, and see if she lives up to the hype. Firehair is a 2/3 with an ability that states when one of your cards is destroyed, this uses that card's on reveal. This means that she has a couple of very clear synergies that she basically has to be run with, and the first of those synergies is Misery. Misery, of course, a 4/8 that destroys your on-reveal cards at a given location and makes their on-reveals happen again. This allows Firehair to be a much more focused card, doing things with low-cost on-reveals that are genuinely very powerful. The on-reveals you're typically looking to repeat are things like the Hood, Iron Patriot, and of course, the hammers that both Thor and Beta Ray Bill are able to create. Thor's is probably the deck that benefits the most from her, and I'll sort of pat myself on the back for that one a little bit, in the sense that I played a lot of Thor's in the past 6 or 7 hours, and it felt like not an embarrassing deck, which is a crazy departure from where it was. This is now a deck that has legit nut draws. It is disruptible, but it can compete. I think it moves with Firehair into like the solid or fringy tier 2.5, where previously it was just not even worth talking about. As such, there are going to be a couple of different Thor's lists when we talk about Firehair, so do prepare yourself for that. Generally speaking, what this card is doing is being used in such a way as to repeat cheap and powerful on-reveals. I have seen a couple people playing Firehair Misery stuff with like big white tigers in like the Electro Blink shell, which I think is cute and maybe good, but that is a shell that is like, okay, are we sure that's better than Red Wing? Is it actually going to work all of the time? I think there's some real hope for that shell, but I haven't seen a cohesive enough deck list to actually make me feel good about it. But there is that one major exception where I do think that there might be something to the Firehair with the larger cards strategy. It feels like something that there may be depth to that maybe not enough people have gotten to. For now, though, we're going to focus on what is working, and that is the Hood, Iron Patriot, and Misery. Those are your cards. This was my most successful deck on the day. It was cooked up by Husky Puppies, but really what's happening is that Firehair is proving to be a valuable piece of anything that was already playing Misery. That seems to be the major thing that sticks out to me about this card right now, which is always play her with Misery, only play her with Misery. Misery is married to this card. This is the Hazmat Ajax relationship. You are just not going to see those cards in decks without each other. Misery is basically telling you to do the exact same things that Firehair is telling you to do, and so they are just in everything together. This is both good and bad. What it means is that there is a very clear buy condition for this card. What it also means is that if you don't have Misery, you are likely going to be unable to use this card to its full potential because, again, the incentives that this card has are the exact same as the incentives that Misery has, and they work together very well. So I would expect to see a lot of Misery in these lists. Now, what this list is doing is playing her as a V-hand card. And what this deck is using her for effectively is just trying to double up on Hoods and double up on Iron Patriots. One of the cool things about Iron Patriot is if you blow up the Iron Patriot, she will act as an Iron Patriot. So you're effectively putting 2 Iron Patriots on the board and forcing your opponent to choose one to contest, because it's actually very difficult to contest 2 Iron Patriots at the same time. This is a deck that genuinely lacks some of the legitimate beef that other decks have. And so having the Carnage backup plan means that if you get Firehair without Misery, you are still going to be able to get multiple Hood procs or maybe multiple Iron Patriot procs. Whereas if you have Misery without Firehair, the same is true. Effectively, she's performing a role here as slightly worse or more conditional misery that also doubles the impact of your misery when you have it. Since this is a deck that actually really does get a lot of value out of misery, basically all of your best things that aren't copying V-Hand are misery related, you're going to get a lot out of Firehair in here as well. I think this is sort of also a model of what the future could look like for this archetype, in the sense that if you are already playing Misery, the Hood, and Iron Patriot, Firehair becomes a very reasonable inclusion in those lists. It's time to talk about the Thor's deck. Now, I'm going to show you 3 different builds of Thor's, and they're going to be different by about 3 to 4 cards every time, and that is really all that's going to be different between them. So I do want to stress that these are all different takes on the same archetype rather than independent archetypes on their own. Now, this is the first one that I played, and it was probably my most successful, basically right up until it wasn't. At a certain point, people started realizing what was going on and deploying relevant tech cards against me. The one that is super concerning is, of course, Juggernaut. Juggernaut really messes with the game plan of this deck, which is to get all your Thors out. Like, your nut draw is basically have Firehair, have Thors, have Jane Foster, have Misery. And that means that you're getting a bunch of triggers on the Beta Ray Bill Stormbreaker and, of course, on Thor's Mjolnir. There was a game where I was playing this deck and my opponent got a 13 power Nimrod, and I just had more power than him in 2 lanes because of the plays that I made and the amount of times I was able to trigger both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. Stormbreaker does benefit from this Misery Firehair thing more than Mjolnir does, because Stormbreaker sort of scales with itself, as it were. So if you have a Firehair on the board, a Stormbreaker Misery will take Beta Ray Bill to 48 power, whereas it will only in quotes here, add 18 power to your Thor, which is much more beatable, if we're going to be totally honest. So what that means is that this is a deck that has a combo finish attached to it, but the real question is what approach the rest of the deck should be taking. And I think that this one is the one that takes the most balanced approach, in the form of, like, we're going to have backup plans, we're going to do good output with our points, we're going to have, like, final turn carnages with our Firehair already on the board, and then a Juggernaut to win that lane and force them to go into the big boy lanes. It does feel a little bit vulnerable to Shang-Chi if you're unable to throw priority, and it's vulnerable to Juggernaut and Alioth if you do throw priority. So it's kind of a pick your poison on the final turn a lot of the time, where it felt like if my opponent had the right tech cards for what I was doing, I didn't really have a ton of game into dealing with that. I played a little bit of full control Thors as well, and I think this one is something that, like, I prefer, or I would prefer in an ideal world, that this is the version of the deck I get to play. I just don't know if it is actually the version of the deck I get to play. There's a lot of cute Invisible Woman stuff that you can do here, like just like hiding your Mjolnirs under Invisible Woman. The fact that you are a Shang-Chi deck also means that you are able to play sort of like a Sarah deck, where you don't actually have to do all the combo Misery stuff or any of that. You can just, like, do some stuff and then have your Thor hammers and then, like, you know, put your guys under Invisible Woman and throw priority that way and Killmonger away everything, and then, like, your demons are safe under Invisible Woman, or use Invisible Woman to delay a Shang-Chi, or put your hammers under Invisible Woman to make your opponent's Shang-Chi not work. There's a lot of just stuff that this deck can do, but I do wonder if it doesn't end up being a little bit too cute. When I played this deck, it felt like Sarah Control but upgraded, and frankly, I don't have the largest amount of respect for Sarah Control right now. And even though I say Sarah Control but upgraded, you are also adding some inconsistency here. So I'm not even sure it's a massive upgrade on a Sarah Control list. What is cool is like you have these like Misery Firehair Hood plays when you don't have your Thors, but that's usually, in my experience, just not going to be enough for you to keep up. You do actually kind of need the numbers that the Thors put on the board, and so you put yourself in some awkward situations when you play this deck, despite the wide variety of cute stuff you can do. One of the cards that saw a pretty big uptick in play with the advent of Firehair is Lady Deathstrike. Obviously, blowing up your opponent's Firehair is a pretty powerful play, especially because if you have priority, turn 5 is when a lot of this like, ooh, I'm going to play my Hood Misery on that turn, and I'm really counting on that to actually go off. Like, there is kind of some real opportunity to make Lady Deathstrike count. This is a deck that manages to play that. It's also using the Sam Wilson Miss Marvel core, which I think is a bit of an underrated kind of core right now. People don't talk about it like a mid-range core, but it kind of is, because ever since Sam Wilson's shield went to 0, it just makes Miss Marvel way easier to trigger. One of the issues with these decks is like typically they're not going to have like the most ability to actually make Miss Marvel go off. Sam Wilson's shield at 0 is sort of like a floor buffer for that. Of course, do keep in mind that both of the hammers are also 0, so you're going to want to keep that straight. Make sure you're not putting them in the same lane as Sam Wilson's shield if you are trying to get Miss Marvel's buff to actually happen. This is another one where it's like, I really do hope that this works out. Like, I really do want this kind of deck to be viable. Also, Quake. Very uniquely powerful right now. It is worth mentioning because Quake is very good into Iron Patriot, and every single deck, and I'm serious when I say that, I think it's going to be like 6 out of 7, and it should be 7 out of 7. All the decks we're going to talk about today basically are Iron Patriot decks too. And that is, again, it's because what is good to repeat early on reveals? What is good about that? Iron Patriot often ends up being the answer. So you see that this is a card that goes with the Hood, it is a card that goes with Iron Patriot, and it is a card that goes with Misery. You're going to see a lot of that. All right, let's get a little bit more into the speculative realm. I've been seeing a lot of people play around with this kind of thing. I want to say the first person I saw it from was Zombies Go Nom Nom, but I'm not positive. So if you are the person who made it first, please don't yell at me in the comments. This is an interesting deck. Like, I get the appeal. What we want to be doing here is using Firehair to repeat our boom boom on reveals, getting a very cheap death, and just generally outputting a lot of points. There are some really exciting things that this deck can do, and since it's a Thanos deck, it's not that far off. One thing that really sticks out, though, is I think it's gone too far into the actual destroy part of Thanos, and it's left out some of the like legit great cards that Thanos typically gets to run. I'm not sure if that ends up being profitable long term. What I'm basically saying is, long term, I would not be surprised if this won the heads up Thanos mirror, because it's a Killmonger death deck, they typically do win the mirror, but ended up less good into everything else than what you'd describe as like normie Thanos or good cards Thanos or whatever. It feels like a worthwhile diversion and definitely like not a bad deck to mess around with on day one. But of all the decks we've talked about so far, this is definitely the one where I have the most like, I have several question marks appearing over my head as if I am a Pokemon NPC that maybe just noticed you. Okay, now let's get into the stuff you probably should not be doing with Firehair, and I think this is fairly instructive. So, Mill. Why is Mill not good with Firehair? Well, honestly, I saw some stats really early on in the day that looked very promising for Mill. I was like, oh my god, was I wrong? I can't believe that Mill is actually going to be kind of playable. And I will say this for Mill, it's a little more playable than you think. Like, the Firehair stuff being a meaningful buff to like your garbagey Yondu stuff, like that is a little bit helpful. It's not better than it was, but it is a lot more playable than it has been because of Firehair. And I think, you know, a lot of that is the things that you are able to do with it. A lot of that is just like, oh, I get some cool stuff. The cool stuff happens when I do this. And a lot of it is that you're just like a deck full of good cards in a world where a lot of other people are destroying their own cards and you're playing death. And so I'm not overly optimistic for this. Like, this feels okay, but I'm not overly optimistic. In order to fit her in, what we ended up giving up is Iron Patriot. I don't like giving up Iron Patriot. You know me. I'm not just someone who wants to do that. But it's either that or Lady Deathstrike. And if we don't play Lady Deathstrike, we get Mobius to death. And it's kind of just a whole thing. Like, you can do the mill thing. I believe at the time of recording, this list is about a 49% win rate in top 10% infinite with like negative 0.1 cubes per game, which is obviously not good and I don't recommend it. But I felt like this was going to be like a 45% win rate deck. And I got to give Mill credit for not being a 45% win rate deck, at least yet. Like, it might end up sort of going down that way, especially once people stop playing things that discount your death. But it was legitimately better than I thought it would be on day one. And that's because I thought it would be total ass. And it was like just medium ass, like warmed over, you know, like it wasn't that bad. It was like a deck, but it just wasn't a good one. I don't exactly know where this one came from. Like, I recognize what it is. It's an attempt at doing like the Darkhawk Misery mid-range thing, but the power of that deck was never really about this stuff. Like, the Darkhawk Misery PF deck existed in like a very specific time frame, and the one thing it wasn't doing was existing in a metagame where its disruption was let me rephrase. You really, really goddamn miss Black Widow. That's what I'm going to rephrase to. You really miss Black Widow. What this deck was doing was basically Black Widow stuff. This deck used to be able to, when Black Widow was on reveal, blow up a Black Widow and then Misery, like blow up a Black Widow with Misery after putting one in your hand because Black Widow's on reveal, so you block the draw on 3, you block the draw on 4 with a Misery, you Phoenix Force it back on 5. That's what this deck was doing. That was the premise. That was the nut draw. When they got rid of Black Widow, it's honestly, like, I'm serious when I say this, I don't think it's even worth trying to revisit this archetype without her. Like, I don't think people get just how crucial the Black Widow game plan was for you. It's like they took Mockingbird out of Thanos. Like, that's the level of, like, you lost your best thing that this deck took. Like, this is a really, really, really iffy deck if it's not denying a bunch of draws every single game. And having a nut draw that says turn 3, 4, and 5, your opponent just doesn't draw cards. They just stop drawing cards on turn 3. That's like what every mill player dreams of that, and they will never achieve it. It's like if that was actually good, and it got to play good cards instead of bad cards. And so, like, this is a deck that, like, I had people ask me about it. I can't imagine playing it without Black Widow. She was such the card for this deck, and being able, like, if we had her right now, this would be busted. I want to be super clear. Like, if we had Black Widow right now and she has an on reveal, this deck would be gross. Their hands would be full of those cards. There would be so many Widow's Bites running around. We don't. And so we shouldn't be doing this. So what's the verdict on Firehair? Well, there are a couple of sort of prerequisites to play her. Baseline, you probably have to have the Hood. You probably have to have Misery. Those are cards that are going to be in every Firehair deck. Like, we talked about the everything else, and we probably didn't give as much time to Hood, Misery, Firehair as we would normally, because I feel like it's just so very obvious what you're supposed to do there, which is trigger the Hood a bunch of times. I hope that wasn't, like, confusing for anybody, the fact that this card was in all of the decks and we didn't really talk about it at all, but, like, yeah, that's, like, kind of like the number one thing that happens here, and then all the strategies that we talk about are, like, arguing about what's number 2, or I should say, it's more like you have one other thing that's, like, maybe better, but that is so good that it goes in everything that this card does. So baseline prerequisite, if you want to be playing this card to the maximal ability that you can, you're going to need the Hood. You're going to need Misery. Just stop it there. You're going to need that. You're probably going to want Iron Patriot. Probably, and by probably, I mean, like, when I say probably going to want Iron Patriot, I mean like 95%. You might want the Thors. I'm not sure I would go out of my way to make that happen. I'm a big sucker for Thor's decks, so it's very likely that I overrate it. So where does this card actually land? I would say that it reminds me the most of like a worse Victoria hand. Where, do you remember when Victoria hand came out and it was kind of everywhere and then it kind of disappeared? And then, a month later, it's like sort of evened out where it's like, it's pretty good. This is a pretty good card, but it's not necessarily like a game breaker. It's just like a good card in the decks that want what it's doing. And it goes with a package of other good cards that do that same sort of thing and have similar incentives, right? And I think the V-Hand deck has just sort of existed ever since then in like various forms, like the Moonstone Overlap or like the full tech version that we were playing today. There's always sort of been a V-Hand deck. And so when I say that Firehair is like slightly worse V-Hand, I'm saying that I'm not sure there's always going to be a Firehair deck in my like meta breakdowns. I think it's very possible that she ends up being part of every Misery deck ever. That is the thing that seems the most likely to me. The Misery edition having Carnage in addition to Firehair, Carnage, Firehair, adding extra stuff for your Hood decks. But like every deck that's playing like Misery, Firehair, Hood, I think that's probably going to stay the same. But that seems to be like her best and most optimal use case. And I'm not really holding my breath for anyone to like bust this one open, so to speak. I kind of think that's just what she does. So for a card with her level of hype, where people were like, this is busted, it's going to dominate the meta, a little bit of a disappointment, frankly. But I think she's a really exciting card that has real potential to be a Misery deck staple. So I would say if I had to put like a number on it, it'd be like 3.5 or 4 out of 5. Where I think that gut check 3.5 makes more sense to me, where like something like V-Hand was like a 4, and that's like the ceiling for her, I think. She is a card with the ceiling of V-Hand and the floor of like significantly worse than that, I think. So is this a worthwhile purchase? If you own Misery, I think if you like playing Misery, you're probably going to like playing this card. If that's sort of where I'm at with it right now. Good enough card to make you seriously consider purchasing it, but not a slam dunk in the way things like Sam Wilson or Iron Patriot were. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it through that video. I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. Remember to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. All of those things help me immensely. I truly appreciate it. And of course, I will see you in the next one.